Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Cheap Trick album, All Washed Up. It's their 21st studio album. I can't believe these guys have put out that many albums in their 52-year career. Also can't imagine them having been around that long, but they have. It just came out on November 14th of 2025. I'm going to do a full review, unboxing of this great album here in just a bit. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on cool things like this, where I'm talking about the brand new Cheap Trick album, All Washed Up. So the band, as I said, 52 years old, formed back in 1973. Though they didn't release their debut album until 1977, and then in 1978, they found success with their live album at Budokan, which has become one of the seminal live albums out of the 70s, really making a name for the band itself. Having the song I Want You to Want Me come off of this and explode, which was actually a song off their second album, In Color. And so the band kind of exploded with that, put their name on the map, became a signature tune for them. What's interesting though is that the band actually would continue with varying degrees of success at that point, but then a decade on, in 1988, released Lap of Luxury, and this album here sent them to the top of the charts again. So the album is known for having its outside songwriters. It's something that the band didn't really like or has grown to not like about the album. But in the end of the day, it was successful for them. Don't Be Cruel, which was an Elvis Presley cover, went to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. But the song The Flame, which has 2 outside songwriters on it, reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Their only number 1 hit to date. It would prove to be the band's commercial peak with this album. But all in all, the band, having had 2 peaks within its career like that, hitting sort of the upper echelon of rock, is pretty amazing when most bands don't do it once, but they actually were able to achieve the pinnacle twice. In its 52-year career, the band has never broken up. They've just continued plugging away, releasing albums all the time. This new album here comes 4 years after the last album, In Another World, from 2021, which at the time was hinted at as being the band's last or maybe perhaps their final album. And I'm really glad to say that we now have All Washed Up, the album we want to talk about here, their brand new 21st studio album to talk about, so that the last one was not the final album. I gotta hope that maybe we'll get another one after this, but you never know with bands that have been around as long as Cheap Trick. The last album could always be the last album. So 21st studio album, 11 tracks on here. It clocks in at 39 minutes. I really like the album art with the washing machines and the all washed up, and then on the back side, the laundry basket that has the records on it. I think that's pretty cool. We'll talk more about all of that in just a bit. But producer for this is Julian Raymond, and Julian Raymond worked with the band on Rockford in 2006. He then came back for The Latest in 2009, and again with their album Bang Zoom Crazy Hello. So those 3 sequential albums, and then he didn't produce the next 3 albums until coming back for this one here. So Julian Raymond has worked with the band before. Title, according to Robin Zander, is a relation to their album All Shook Up, 1980. So this one here, a play on that, All Washed Up. But I like to think of it even more than that, as sort of the band is, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, like the band is, has-beens, they're old, they're dinosaurs, they're all washed up. And yet what we get out of this is actually an album that sounds very hungry and very young. It's very rockin' right from the get-go. It's not all polished up the way that we might expect, or as some of the other Cheap Trick albums are. The first single, 12 Gates, that came off of the album had that power pop sound, the sugary pop sensation of Cheap Trick that we know, which was a great track, but predominantly the album is not that. Um, and even with different tracks on here, Robin's voice sounds as though it's run through a filter, which threw me for a bit of a loop when I first put this album on. I'm not sure why they did this because Robin's vocals are still very good. So I have to think that it was actually something that was done as a stylistic choice for the album. Because they don't need any of that studio trickery on his voice, which is when a lot of artists will tend to run their voice through a filter or do something like that to try to hide the fact that they can't hit the notes that they used to hit. But that's just not the case with Robin Zander. Um, so the What's typical on Cheap Trick albums is not the sound that we initially get on here, that more raw, down and dirty sort of sound that's on here, which kicks off with the title track itself, All Washed Up. But the second track on here, called All Wrong, Long Gone, is even a bit closer to the vocal stylings of Brian Johnson of AC/DC, to the point that it threw me for a loop and I had to kind of, wait, what am I even listening to here? Had that thought pop up in my head when I was first listening to it because I wasn't entirely sure that it was still Robin Zander. The first four songs are just full on absolute rock songs on this album. We don't actually get the first power pop tinged song in the typical Cheap Trick style until track 5, Best Thing. And then you get that sugary sweet voice that we know and love from Robin Zander on here, and the sound that just screams Cheap Trick. And it's kind of a song that you might even think would be an album opener on this. And maybe they chose to open it with these more rock and raw versions of songs in order to throw us for that loop. Like I said, that when it first heard that, it was a bit shocking, but as time has gone on, I really quite enjoy this album and the way that it doesn't open with stuff that I would have typically expected. Their last album, In Another World, the opening track on it was exactly what you would have expected. And I won't say it got old very quickly, but when you already know what to expect, sometimes you're not as likely to go back and keep listening or keep hearing or whatnot. And I gotta say, with this album here, because it didn't immediately catch my ear, I kept throwing it back on. So I think it did its job in what it was supposed to do, which is maybe ruffle a bit of feathers, mix things up a bit, cause us to sort of say, hey, what's going on here? And if things are a little off kilter, it might make us take a bit more notice. And I think that's exactly what's happening here, where the band is not really going through the motions. And in fact, they're trying something new. And the album is a bit more real and more interesting for that, I think. All right, let's talk about some of the standout tracks on this album. I already talked about 3 of them so far, being tracks 2, 5, and 6. But I want to talk about track 3, The Riff That Won't Quit. And that song is exactly as it sounds. It's got a killer guitar riff on it. It sticks with you long after the song has been played. It's one of the most rockin' tunes on the album, and just one that jumped out at me from the get-go. And in my opinion, the second half of the album is really where it picks up. And if you're looking for that traditional Cheap Trick sound, it really makes its appearance in the second half. So along with tracks 5 and 6, track 7, Bad Blood. This one here is classic. It's right in the wheelhouse of Cheap Trick. It's what you'd expect from them. And it's a really good, power pop number by the group. Track 10, A Long Way to Worcester, a mid-pace rocker. This one here is kind of a bridge between those really rockin' opening songs on here and the more power pop version of the band itself. And I think it's a great bridge between the two styles that are on the album, and really helps kind of move things forward for them. This is a track where I think it actually could have been maybe an album opener, or maybe further up in the album mix to be that bridge. Having come so much later in the album, it doesn't quite do the job that it could do, but it's a great song nonetheless. And the last track on the album, track 11, Wham Boom Bang, something a little different. It's not something that I think I've ever really heard from them. It's a poppy little number that kind of builds. It wraps up the album in a very sunny sort of disposition on a bit of a high note, using traditional elements of rock stuff you might have gotten back in, say, the early to mid 50s in there, but it seems right at home for Cheap Trick. But due to the different feel of it, I'm glad that it is the last track on the album, almost like a bonus track, because I think if they had put it anywhere else in the album, it might have broken up the flow of the album, but it's a great way to wrap and end things up. All right, so let's take a look at it. I was already talking about how much I enjoyed the album cover, all washed up, washing machines, each one having something that addresses a member of the band, essentially. We got the suds making that up on there. And then on the back side, the laundry basket being used as an album holder, which I really like. We got track listing up here on it. So it's cardboard case, and it's done like an LP from the side. And when we pull this out here, we get the album in a sleeve, so a shirt folded because it's been washed, and we get the checkerboard socks, which I really like. And then the CD itself is in here, but nice that they have that. And then we get the booklet, which is a zoom in on their album covers from the laundry basket photo that was on the back side, and you get all your lyrics and everything that's in here. So it just goes through. No pictures of the band though, so I'm pretty bummed about that. I get it. The guys are up there in age, but I still like to see my favorite artists no matter how old they get. I kind of wish we had gotten a few band photos in there. I think it would have rounded it out just a little bit nicer. But all in all, I think the packaging's pretty cool. If we got to go with cardboard and we're not going to get a jewel case, then I like this packaging. I go with this one before I would go with a digipack. I really just don't like those very much. All right, bottom line on this album, the album kicks off in different territory, and it's not really where the band is used to being at. This is a much more raw rockin' direction, but I think it's a breath of fresh air. As I said, it caught me off guard when I first heard it, but then going back and listening to it multiple times, it has become very fresh sounding. And I think that's great where it doesn't have the band trying to replicate old or past glories. It sounds like the band is just doing what they want to do. So it's got the band, or the album, I should say, really has the band rocking out. It does have traditional Cheap Trick style sounding songs on it. So you get a little bit of everything on this album here, but I would say this album had the beginning of this has the feel of very early stuff from the band. And then we move the same way that the band aged over its career into that more power pop sounding stuff, where that's where the album goes. So this album for me almost sounds like we're going from the 1977 beginning of the group and that more raw energy when they started out through their heyday and peak on to where we are today. It's almost like a little history in terms of sounds of the band as I'm listening to it, and I very, very much have enjoyed that. The album itself kind of is broken into two halves. As I mentioned, the first half of it being that more raw rockin' direction, the second half of it being the more power pop direction of it. And in a way, the album probably could have used a different track sequence on it in order to get a more even flow to the album, valleys and peaks and things like that, because it starts off really rocking and really high, and then it kind of comes down from there the rest of the way on the album. Not to say that's a negative thing, but depending upon the type of style of album that you like, that effect is happening here. But for a band that has been around for 52 years, I think this is a great slab of rock music coming from them. They still sound amazingly hungry after all this time on this album here. They're even breaking a bit new ground on it, especially with that last track, track 11 that I talked about about on here. So all in all, I think the album is great. I think you guys as Cheap Trick fans should definitely check this thing out and give it a spin and give it multiple spins, because as I said, for me, it caught me off guard on the first couple listens, maybe even 2 or 3 listens. This is that album where you're really going to have to give it a few spins to let it open up your mind, but I think it's going to be well worth it in the end of the day, and therefore I'm highly recommending this album for all Cheap Trick fans. And there you go. That is my review for the Cheap Trick album, All Washed Up. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you checked this album out, let me know your thoughts. Did it catch you off guard too? Do you hear that raw rockin' sound that is kind of like the debut album on here at the beginning? Does it move through for you guys the way that it does for me in terms of sort of the history musically of the band? All in all, very interesting album, and amazing that a band 52 years into their career is releasing an album this good. But there you go. That's my review. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.